Today I'm continuing my series on herbs, and I want to share with you a master recipe for how to make medicinal herb tea that is much better at extracting all the nutrients from your herbs as opposed to simply using a little herbal tea bag. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferment, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Well, there are actually two methods for making medicinal herb teas, and I'm going to share both of them with you today. Method one takes a little bit longer, so it's a nice method to use when you have time. Method two is a little quicker, and that comes in handy when you are really in need of a medicinal herb tea. Also, when we get to method two, I'm going to go over some variations that are within that method that involve whether you're steeping the leaves, the roots, or the flowers, since in some cases there need to be some variations in how you treat those different parts of the herb. Now, just for example purposes, we're going to make peppermint tea, but this is a master recipe that can be applied to any herb. However, that said, there are a few exceptions as to using this method when working with certain herbs. The two exceptions are with marshmallow and slippery elm. We're going to be using hot water, but if you use this master recipe to make a medicinal herb tea using marshmallow or using slippery elm, you'll want to start the process with cool water. And before we actually begin method one, I just want to share with you what I mean when I use the term master recipe. A master recipe, which really can be applied to anything, is simply a template to follow. And you would apply this master recipe template to whatever you were making. In this case, we're going to apply it to making a medicinal herb tea. And in future videos, I'm going to be sharing with you master recipes for making other herbal preparations. So basically, a master recipe template boils down to certain steps that you follow every time, regardless of what you're applying it to. Now, method one is very easy, and it especially works well for you if you've got time on your side, because you're going to want to let this steep for a minimum of 4 hours, but overnight is even better. The first thing you're going to need is a heat-proof quart-sized jar, and what I've got here is just a basic canning jar. And 1 quart is the same as 4 cups, and it's very close to 1 liter. You don't need to worry about being super precise, as long as you're somewhere in that 1 quart or 1 liter amount. Next, whatever medicinal herbal tea that you're making, you want to have your herbs ready, and you're going to need 4 to 5 tablespoons of the dried herb. If you're using fresh herbs, you're going to want to double or triple that amount. And generally what I do if I'm starting with fresh herbs is to fill my jar up about halfway with the fresh herbs. And an important point that I want to share is that this method works beautifully for any part of the herb that you're using. So if, for example, you were making a tea using echinacea, the purple coneflower, you could put the roots in here, you could put the leaves in here, and you could put the flowers in here. And it would extract the maximum nutrients from all of those parts of the herb. So fresh or dry, and any part of the herb works beautifully in this method. Now, when it comes to the dry herb, the reason that I mentioned some variation in amount from 4 to 5 tablespoons is that some herbs are very strong and others are more mild. An herb like peppermint, especially in its dry form, I find works best if you add 4 tablespoons of the dried herb to your quart-sized jar as opposed to 5 tablespoons. But with some of your more mild herbs, definitely 5 tablespoons will be the perfect amount. Alrighty, so now I'm just going to go ahead and measure in my 4 tablespoons of dried peppermint leaves. Now what you want to do is put your kettle on and bring your water up to a boil. And when it comes up to a boil, just let it sit in your tea kettle for a little bit just to let any boiling calm down. I really just estimate when it comes to the temperature in my tea kettle. I bring it up to a boil and let it rest a little and figure that's a good temperature. But if you're the type of person who likes to be very precise, what you're looking for when you make a medicinal herb tea is that your hot water is approximately 200 degrees Fahrenheit, which I believe is about 93 degrees Celsius. Next, all we're going to do is just pour this water into our jar, into our quart-sized jar, and we want to get it almost to the top of the rim. Now, once you add your hot water into your jar, you may notice, especially if you're using dried herbs, that everything's going to come up to the top of the rim. Don't worry about that. As you'll see, little by little, it's going to all start falling back down to the bottom. But if you want to speed things up, you can certainly take your spoon and just give everything a bit of a stir. But the nice thing about giving it a stir, if you want to, is that it also helps cool it off ever so slightly before we move on to covering it. Now, you could certainly use a canning lid or one of the plastic lids or whatever lid may have came with the jar that you're using. But I find that I really prefer just to use a little piece of paper towel or a little bit of cloth, something that is not going to catch the condensation and then drip it back down into the medicinal herb tea. Hopefully, whatever you're using in terms of your lid is free of chemicals and whatnot, but just to be on the safer side, I find that using something in the paper or cloth family that's just going to absorb a little bit of the condensation and not drip it back down into the medicinal herb tea is a better process or a better method to use. So I'm just going to put a little paper towel here because I know that's something that a lot of people will have, but you can also use a little bit of flour sack towel. You've seen me use those a lot when I make bone broth, when I strain the bone broth. I've cut up little pieces of flour sack towels and I've used those to like cover my kombucha or my herb teas and things like that, so that's definitely an option as well. Now I'm just going to put this in an undisturbed place in my kitchen and let it steep for the next 4 hours. As I said earlier, you can also let it steep overnight. And clearly allowing it to steep overnight is going to be better than the 4 hours in that you're going to be extracting even more beneficial nutrients from your herbs the longer that you steep it. But really overnight, or approximately 12 hours, is really all you need. After that is really a bit of overkill, so to speak. And you may find that the taste gets a little bitter and you're really not extracting any more nutrients at that point. Now, while this is steeping, I want to mention that in this series of videos on herbs, I have 2 videos about what I consider to be essential medicinal herbs that you can either grow in your kitchen garden or that you can buy already in their dried form. So I highly recommend watching those 2 videos, and I'll be sure to link to them in the iCards above and in the description below so that you can catch up if you've not had a chance to watch them. Also, I want to address a question that some of you may have. You may be wondering why, if you're making a medicinal herb tea from marshmallow or slippery elm, why do you start with cool water? And you can simply, as I said, use cool water. It can just be filtered water or bottled water or spring water, whatever you have on hand. And generally, when steeping those 2 herbs in cool water, you do want to allow them the full 12 hours. But why the cool water? The reason is marshmallow and slippery elm are very high in compounds that are referred to as mucilage, like mucus or some very gelatinous. And herbalists believe that if you put hot water on top of herbs like marshmallow and slippery elm, that you damage those mucilage properties. And after you steep them in cool water and you strain out the solids, you can warm that liquid, the tea, the medicinal herb tea, gently and then enjoy it that way. But something that you want to keep in mind is whenever you're working with marshmallow or slippery elm, make sure that you dilute it so that you're actually drinking a medicinal herb tea and not something that is thick and mucilage in nature or gelatinous in nature, because that can cause blockage and you need to be very careful about that. And that brings us to an important point that I want to share whenever it comes to working with herbs in their medicinal capacity. If you're pregnant, if you're nursing, if you're thinking of using herbal remedies with children, if you take medication, either over the counter or prescription, or if you have allergies, you really want to check with your healthcare professional to find out if the herb that you're planning on using is appropriate for you or anyone in your family. So it's always important to be careful and take precautions whenever you're planning on using herbs for their medicinal properties. Another thing I want to mention about making herbal medicinal teas, when you are looking at adding 4 to 5 tablespoons of the dried herbs, or about half of the bottle's worth, or half of the quart bottle's worth of fresh herbs, roots, and/or flowers, is that you can mix any of the herbs together that you want to achieve the mixture that you're looking for its medicinal purposes. For example, you may want to have chamomile flavored with lemon balm or something along those lines, or even add chamomile and lemon balm along with the peppermint, and so on and so forth. And when you do something like that, what you're looking for is to try to achieve a relatively equal amount of each of the herbs. And the reason that you want to try to get approximately equal amounts of the herbs, whether dry or fresh, that you're adding to your jar, is because you want to maximize the medicinal properties of each of those herbs. However, say you really just want to maximize the nutrients from a particular herb, but add in another herb or multiple herbs just to help with the flavor. That's often done, for example, with chamomile. Chamomile has a very bland flavor, but it also is very helpful to help you sleep. So you may want to start with chamomile, maybe 3 tablespoons of the dried herb, and then maybe add in a tablespoon or 2 of other herbs that can help flavor it, like lemon balm or lemon verbena, or lemon thyme, or peppermint, although this is somewhat stimulating. But in any event, I think that you understand the formula that when you want to maximize getting the most nutrients from a combination of herbs, you want to get them into your jar in about equal proportions. If you're looking to maximize one specific herb, but you need a little bit of better flavoring, then you want to put a maximum amount of the herb in which you want to extract the most nutrients from, and then smaller amounts of the herbs that you're adding, more for flavor than specifically for their medicinal purposes. Well, I'm going to jump ahead here a little so that I can show you the whole process. But what you'll want to do after you've let this steep for 4 hours or overnight, whatever you have time for, what you're going to want to do is I've just got a large measuring cup here, a bowl will work, whatever you have, and a strainer, and you're just going to want to strain out all of the solids that are in your jar. Let's see if I can do this neatly. Now, once you have all the solids strained out, you'll have about 1 quart of a wonderful medicinal herb tea. Now, you can store this. I've just got a canning jar. Any jar you have on hand will work, and now that it's cool, I feel more comfortable using a plastic lid or a canning lid, and you can go ahead and store this in your refrigerator, and it should stay fairly fresh for about 3 to 4 days. And when you're ready to consume it, you just want to warm it gently and enjoy it just as you would any herb tea. So you just go ahead and pour this in your jar. Look at that, glorious. Put your cap on, and in the fridge it can go. Medicinal herbs can be enjoyed warm or cold, but Generally, herbalists will recommend that they be enjoyed warm to help really bring out their medicinal properties. However, there are some exceptions. Generally, when it comes to battling bladder infections, herbalists will recommend drinking the appropriate medicinal herb tea cold. Now let's move on to method number 2. Now for method 2, there are some variations depending on what part of the plant that you're steeping into a medicinal herb tea. But the first thing that you'll want to do is get a pot that'll hold at least 1.5 cups extra of water. And the reason that we add that extra 1/2 cup is because in this process there's going to be a little evaporation. And adding that little bit of extra water ensures that we're going to wind up with about 1 quart of the medicinal herb tea. So just go ahead and pour your water right into your pot. Now, this is where there's some variation. If you're working with the roots and the stems of the plant, like for example, I have the roots of an echinacea plant here. In order to extract all the nutrients from the roots, we're going to add them into the water. We're going to bring this up to a boil, put the lid on, and let them simmer for 15 minutes. Now, I'm not going to use a full 4 to 5 tablespoons of the echinacea root because I want to add in some other herbs so that I can show you the variations in this second method. Because unlike method 1 that gives you the time to extract everything that you want from the roots and the stems and the leaves and the flowers, this is the quick method for when you need your herbal medicinal tea quickly. But with this quicker method, you need to treat the roots and the stems differently than you treat the leaves and the flowers. And the rules are the same whether they're dried like what I've got here or they're fresh. Now the amounts are pretty much the same as if you were doing this in a quart-sized jar. You're going to be looking for about 4 to 5 tablespoons of your dried herbs or about 1/2 quart-sized jar of fresh herbs. And that can be a combination of the roots, stems, leaves, and flowers. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is turn this up to high and bring our water up to a boil. Well, my water's come up to a nice rolling boil. Now what I'm going to do is turn it down to a medium simmer, and I'm just going to let it calm down a little bit. Well, this has calmed down to a medium simmer. So now what I'm going to do is take 3 tablespoons of our echinacea root, and I'm going to go ahead and just sprinkle those right into our medium simmer water. Now I'm going to cover this and I'm going to let those roots simmer. Now after those roots have been simmering on a medium simmer for 15 minutes, you want to turn your heat down to its lowest setting, its lowest simmer. Now we'll remove the lid, and I just recommend opening it away from you because a lot of steam will come out. Now we took this step of a medium simmer because we were using roots. And this is exactly what you would want to do if you were using roots or stems. Now, if all you were using to make your medicinal herb tea was roots and stems, you would strain out the solids at this point, turn off the heat. I have it on a minimum simmer because I'm going to explain what we're going to do with these two. But if all you were using were the roots and stems, you would strain your medicinal herb tea at this point and be able to enjoy it. But within this second method of making medicinal herb teas, I wanted to show you the variations based on what part of the herb that you're using. So if you're just using roots and stems, you can stop right here. But if you want to add flowers and leaves, you'll move on to this next step that we're going to take. And what I'm going to do at this point, with the heat on its lowest setting, this is going to be the lowest simmer, I'm going to take my chamomile flowers, and you would be using any flowers that you want, and I'm going to go ahead and just put those in, and then I'm going to get a tablespoon of my mint leaves, and I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle those in. Now, if you wanted a less mint flavor, You could use less mint. If you wanted more of the medicinal properties that chamomile offers, you could add more chamomile flowers. It's totally up to you. And in those videos where I talk about the essential medicinal herbs, I talk a lot about the properties that these different medicinal herbs offer. So definitely check that out, and that'll help you come up with the combinations that you want to make when it comes to making medicinal herb teas. But in any event, at this point, we're just going to put our lid back on. We're going to keep this on the lowest setting as possible, and we're going to let that simmer on low for 15 minutes. Now, speaking of variations, what if you were making a medicinal herb tea that only included flowers and leaves? What you would do is bring your water up to a boil, just like we did in the beginning, and then you're going to turn it down to its lowest simmer, its lowest setting, instead of the medium setting. You're going to turn it down to its lowest setting, you're going to let everything calm down, then you're going to add in your flowers and or your leaves, fresh or dry, and then you're just going to let it simmer on low for 15 minutes. Because you have to keep in mind that your flowers and your leaves are a lot more tender than the roots and the stems. So the roots and the stems need a little more simmer, a little longer time in the hot water, versus your flowers and your leaves, which being more tender, need less time to have their essential oils, their volatile oils extracted from them. Plus, you always want to keep in mind that you don't want to be boiling or even medium simmering flowers and leaves, because their volatile oils are precious, and so they are more tender and more susceptible to being destroyed by high heat. Now, this has been simmering for a total of 30 minutes. The first 15 minutes was on a medium simmer because we were simmering roots. And after that initial medium simmer for the roots, we then turned the heat down to medium. We added in our flowers and our leaves, and we let it simmer on low this time for another 15 minutes. So now we're all set to give this a straining. Now all I've done is get my measuring cup, you can use a bowl too, and my strainer, and I'm going to go ahead and strain out these solids. And now in about 30 minutes, we've got some wonderful hot medicinal herbal tea all ready for us to enjoy. Now, if you'd like to learn more about essential medicinal herbs, how to grow them, and how to make home remedies with them, be sure to click on this video over here, where I have a playlist sharing the essential herbs that I think are best for your herbal medicine cabinet, as well as how to use them in making some wonderful home remedies, including a homemade cough syrup. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.